Well, good morning, everybody. Here we are about to turn the calendar over to the month of July, so I thought it'd be just a good idea to have a quick look back at the month of June. To me, June was kind of a month of two different halves, and the first part of that, when I'm going to look at temperatures here, really the first part of that pattern we were in June began back in May. So from the second half of May to the front half of June, we saw, for the most part, very cold temperatures throughout the Midwest, upper Midwest, northern plains, all the way into the Northeast. While so much of the South, the deep South, getting way down here toward the Gulf, was very, very hot, as was the Western United States. Now, as we progressed through the month of June, this pattern kind of shifted. It moved. We saw overall more ridging taking place across the eastern half of the United States with, remember, the big Bermuda high shift over to Nashville. And when you look at June 15th through the 29th, we see quite a bit of very hot temperatures across the eastern part of the United States, while, to be honest, it got quite cold in the Pacific Northwest specifically. Now, we're going to look to see what kind of pattern we're going to revert to next here in the next few minutes here as we walk through this video. But I think that transition is quite telling about the way that these longer waves in the atmosphere are going to behave as we go forward. Now, one thing I do want to point out is that since the 19th, if we look back at the minimum temperatures, so these are the average low temperature ranks by climate district, if we see a return of these very, very hot nights throughout much of the Midwest, Great Lakes states, Mid-Atlantic, Northeast, as we approach, pollination and grain fill for the crops that are grown in this area, this is going to be quite stressful in the crop, and we need to consider that. So we need to do a quick deep dive into temperatures here in just a few moments. The precipitation side of the ranks for June are much harder to decipher. Now, it's quite easy to see the incredibly dry conditions that were in the Northwest, the drier conditions that were across parts of North Dakota into Canada. You know that Manitoba is still quite dry. The Mid-Atlantic issues up toward the Northeast. But some of the flash drought issues are hidden in the size of the climate reporting districts in the midsection of the country. They're also hidden by the fact this is a 30-day, map. So we have wetter conditions early, followed by dry conditions in this area. Let me show you what I'm talking about. This is the last 14 days of total accumulated precipitation as a percent of normal. And again, I am unsure why the AHPS data has been out in the Western United States. I have to, we sometimes see the data drop out, but we need to figure out what's going on here and get it fixed. But starting in the west, the Columbia Basin, very, very dry. The Snake River Valley, quite dry. You then get over into the Colorado Basin, quite dry. Then there's just some hints about the dryness that's been through here. Pockets throughout parts of Nebraska, North Dakota, South Dakota. Then take a look at this region here. While I've seen huge storms ripping off the Front Range, there's been some spots that have been missed. And then there's this really compelling area that runs right in through here that has been quite dry as well, including parts of Illinois, my home state. And while I've been out of town, I've been keeping a close eye on my lawn, to be honest with you, just to see how things have looked through the doorbell camera. And my neighbor hasn't had to mow. I asked him to mow if it needed it, and he's not come over to do that yet, which tells me the heat and the dryness that's been around in central Illinois is going to be impactful. Take a look at parts of the southeast, and then again, mid-Atlantic toward the northeast. I just want to point out that there are regions that continue to show up very dry. And you look over the last 7 days, which for much of this whole section of the country was very, very hot. We see some places miss some of these scattered storms, and this is what the discussion was about. We knew that we'd see this ring of fire setting up, and there it is quite clearly, all right? And we knew that if you were inside of this, it was going to be very disorganized convection, storms. And some people were going to land those storms and other folks were not. So it seems to be a forecast that did verify here in the near term. Now, what I'm concerned about is, as we look forward into this forecast, where these soil moisture deficits continue to show up, how is that going to influence evaporation rates? How's it going to influence plant health as the temperatures will most likely continue to stay above average now at the hottest time of year for the Midwestern United States? And then at the same time, we're looking at very sporadic thunderstorms. So you've been staring at a map showing the latest 0 to 40 centimeter, that's 16 inches, soil moisture percentile. So again, we look at this map, and these numbers down here represent more of a rank than anything. And I just identify, a pocket in through here, central Texas. This area is about to get flooded out, so I'm not overly concerned about the deficits that are in this region. But take a look up here in the Red River Valley of the North. Pockets of South Dakota, then come back to Wyoming, Montana, this whole Northwest drought issue. That's not just there. It's into the Willamette Valley, into the North Central Valley of California, And I think this map is one we should just dwell on for a moment to see what the range in precipitation, the disparity has really kind of done. Now, on satellite yesterday, we got a show. This was impressive. This was as the sun was getting through the afternoon hours toward the evening. You can just see some deep convection throughout a lot of the U.S. And this tells me that the atmosphere does have moisture in it. It is capable of pop. Look at these storms through here. Big complex rolling through parts of Missouri. You can see the one that's going through southern and central Wisconsin. More storms coming off the front range of the Rocky Mountains. But I wanted just to show you that these storms really packed a punch. Here's just a quick look at the last 3 days of hail. And if we concentrate our attention mostly here on the north central plains, some of these storms were dropping some very large hail. Just this past weekend, look at these things. Now, there were numerous reports of tornadoes as well. While we didn't have any reported yesterday, strong straight line wind damage, more hail was the kind of the preferred mode of convection. And then if we go back the day before, look at all of the wind events that were across parts of the east over the Appalachian Mountains. And then the hail through here. We had 17 reported tornadoes, including some absolutely stunning views of them in parts of South Dakota getting into Minnesota. If you haven't seen those, there are many storm chasers posted them on Twitter. And then if I take you back one more day to the 27th, again, most of North Dakota hit hard hail, tornadoes. But just take a look at the dotted wind reports from some of these storms. Now, I do want to show you something that was kind of interesting. As I was watching Barry, so this is what's left of Barry coming in through here, which did make it up to a tropical storm over the weekend, I started to notice something else that was quite interesting, and it's this feature right in through here. You see, if we zoom in there on Texas, let's let this reset here, because it seems to have, I'm about out of my bandwidth. I'm so sorry, but I'm about to lose all of it. But what I was noticing, watch this over again. Let's start that back at the beginning. As the sea breeze came on shore, look at these storms that just line through parts of Louisiana and Texas, and then watch the boundary roll right through here. That is a beautiful animation on radar, just showing you what summer convection can do. And then right at the end of this, this one caught my eye right up here. And I went out and looked at that one as well. I'm gonna refresh this so you can see it. There we go. Now watch these storms. I gotta pause this. This is so incredible. You have two complexes of storms, one here and another there. And they're putting out their outflow, which we can see as these thin arcing lines right through here. And what happens is they hit. Now that's Amarillo. This is the panhandle of Texas. And they're about to hit right here. Now watch what happens. See that massive line of storms that just pops up? It doesn't last long, but it explodes on the surface convergence of two fronts, essentially. These are fronts created by storms, outflow boundaries. And what a beautiful view of that. One other thing to take note of, I almost glossed over it, but at the end of this animation, okay, the sun is setting. You see these here? I believe that these are bats leaving their, their whatever they are, their caves underneath bridges. I don't know where they are down there, but those are bats going out to eat mosquitoes. And for what I care, they can eat every one of them. I'm in the north woods of Wisconsin right now. I think the state bird of Wisconsin is the mosquito. But it's incredible just to see that. Sorry. All right. A little bit of a diversion there. Let's come back to what's going on with the tropical system. We do have Barry here, which is now the remnants of it. It's been broken apart by land and friction. But we do have an area around Florida I'm going to talk to you about in a few moments that I think is going to be key to understanding toward the end of this week. Bigger picture things. All right. Now that we've had this discussion for months. Going back into April, a loss of momentum. That gave us the cutoff lows of April and May. We then got into mid-May, still there. We were worried that this was going to come back in June and get deeper into July. And I've said the farther this drops off, the greater the risk of a long wave, slow pattern that will produce storms, but very inequitably distribute the rainfall. And that's what happens when you have a low momentum atmosphere. Now, had the spring storms, the cutoff lows that came through in April, not been there, this upcoming forecast would be one where we'd be talking about substantial widespread drought conditions. But there's moisture in the soil to be used first. So what it looks like right now for the next 15 days is that the pattern is being dominated by a northward shifted jet. And for the North Atlantic, it's here. And it kind of comes weekly, but it's not really organized across the North Pacific. You can kind of see it somewhere there, and it meets back up here. Now you can tell that's where the jet is by looking at where the faster wind speeds are compared to the climatological average. They're right here. Very northward shifted piece of the jet stream. And I'll be honest with you, the area that I think has been hit hardest by this pattern with this, it's not technically a block. I mean, you have a low over a high, but this longer standing wave in the atmosphere has hit Europe pretty hard. For the last 20 days, we've watched temperatures in the Iberian Peninsula, France, getting over to Germany, and at times extending all the way over to Ukraine, had very, very hot temperatures while the Russian wheat belt was quite cool. And these very hot temperatures have increased evaporation rates. Now, I want you to look at this next map with a grain of salt. Okay, this is the GRACE, the satellite GRACE by NASA, and its measurement of root zone soil moisture. Actually, it's inference of root zone soil moisture. It's not measuring the water in the soil. It's measuring micro fluctuations in gravity and attributing them to soil moisture. And that's just one of the extremely complicated parts of the algorithm behind the GRACE satellite. The G in GRACE stands for gravity. Now, I don't remember a time when I've looked at the GRACE data and not seen deficits here. But what I'm trying to look for here is any indication of how dry it's been. So let's complement that with the CPC gauge data. There's a global network of rain gauges which are shared among all the countries. And our version of it, the Climate Prediction Center's version of the half-degree data, shows that throughout parts of Central Europe, getting over here toward Ukraine, the Black Sea, Turkey, we've seen some very, very dry conditions. There have been sporadic thunderstorms that have come in this pattern, but it's been very, very dry. We need to assess what this potential drought situation is going to continue to look like as we go forward. Because the near-term forecast of the next 7 days continues to show very dry conditions over a lot of Europe. But I want you to note this. The European model on the day 4 through 10 tries to deliver storms through some of the driest parts of Europe. So we need to keep a close eye on what that potential setup may look like. Now, if we come back to, actually, I want to show you one more thing. Let's go and look at the temperatures. So even with those storms, we have a brief cool down. See that? But most of the next 7 days, or 5 to 7 days, are very hot throughout the rest of Europe. It's this cool down that's coming later in the time period to kind of break this all apart. So there is a front forecast to move through France and Germany. It could be pushing more of the heat farther to the to the east here. Okay, now back to the United States. I'm going to show you 3 models. They're all going to show you 14 days. All right. Now, as I look at it here, this is the newest update from the European model. This goes all the way to mid-July. Compare this, which has dryness throughout the Canadian prairie, parts of the northern plains, sections of the Midwest and Ohio Valley, very wet down here in Florida through the southeast. And a lot of this is coming at the end of this week. And then you see through here, this continues to show me an active start to the monsoon. This is now the AI model. If I go back and forth, there are some similarities between the ensemble and the AI that need to be taken into consideration because they do look much different than the GFS. Now, if you notice, the GFS is the wetter model. It's the more juicy, more thunderstorm-producing model that I've got. So we need to break these down and start to assess what's going on. National Weather Service put this out. I'm recording a little early this morning. It's about 5:30. We can see here we do have we have heat advisories here in parts of the Delta, getting up then again into the Columbia Basin over toward the Snake River Valley. We do have some flood issues that are very nearby, plus some strong storms that are moving through Kansas right about now. But as we look at the temperatures, watch these. This is incredible. Here's today's highs. Watch the heat come into the northwest. Triple digits from Boise all the way to Yakima. Much cooler here under the rain-cooled, cloud-filled air. We then go into Wednesday, which is July 2nd, July 3rd. 90s just ripping through this area here. And then toward the end of the week, this would be 4th of July. Excuse me. And it's going to be a hot one if you're in the midsection of the country here. Temperatures easily getting up into the upper 80s, lower 90s, with heat index values probably much higher than that. Getting into Saturday, July the 5th, into Sunday, July the 6th, there's another frontal boundary coming through, knocking those temperatures back down to the 80s, which is going to be needed. So that lands us on these next 3 maps. The first one shows you stress degree days. Again, we're adding up the temperatures above 86 degrees Fahrenheit over a 7-day time period, and we know that we need to be just observant of these accumulating throughout the season. So when I return home, I've got a new algorithm I'm going to put into some code to show you how many stress degrees we've had on the year. We'll also look at the year-to-date GDDs as well, given certain starting dates. We'll get that into the forecast videos next week. And finally, we're going to look at the winds, because these winds really enhance evaporative processes. So when we start to think about summertime being the hottest, the time of year we can have our greatest evaporation rates, the winds can enhance that. We still have our strong offshore wind event in California, but the winds in parts of the plains are expected to crank up quite a bit too, which is why we see the evaporation rates here approaching 2 inches per week. It's very common to get those numbers down here in the Southwest, but and in parts of the Columbia Basin, but 2 inches here is pretty high. Now, if you look across the rest of the country, what I want you to remember is when there are areas, like I showed at the beginning, where there's storms all around, but they don't get into specific pockets, those pockets are losing water at that rate. 1.56 inches per week in my hometown. So if we don't catch a storm, these higher temperatures are costly. So here's the next 5 days. We go out there day 5 through 10. And again, this is just cloud cover and rain. A lot of heat with the way the ridge is opening up in the northeast, all throughout the eastern United States. So we're hot in the northwest. Look at this heat. Now it subsides by day 5 through 10. Now watch it come back in the northwest. There it is again. And that's an indication that we continue to see a more northward displaced jet that favors ridges. And we're going to have to keep an eye on how these temperatures roll through the middle part of this month. Now that will be a particular 5-day stretch that I'm going to be very interested in. This would be this mid-July, July 10 through 15 timeframe. Do the temperatures break down? Because given some of the delays in planting, this is going to be right around pollination. And that would be absolutely key to determining the success of the crop in the Midwest, knowing that there are pockets of very dry conditions here. So let's move on with this. I want to next take you to the, just the way that the atmosphere is set up later this week. You can see that we are going to be watching a tropical system come through here. Barry's already been washed out, and we're going to keep a close eye in this region. But overall, what I want to focus on is the position of the Pacific High, which is here. And again, we just have this kind of, I guess I can call it a 3-piece Bermuda High. There's just flow coming around it in a very broad sense. This has been one of the more expansive Bermuda Highs I've seen. What I'm going to be watching for is this. Now, just keep your eye. If you're on the West Coast, keep your eye here. If you're on the East Coast, keep it here. If you're in the Midwest, keep it over here as well. As I click play, I'm just looking for high pressure, like here or there, that gets displaced. Like if the Bermuda High starts to race off to the North Atlantic, look, see it's starting to do that? July 3rd, 4th, and 5th. If it stayed there, we'd be in trouble. But as we get there to like the 6th and 7th and 8th, we start to see it opening back up. See this? Opening back up into this region, keeping the flow from the Gulf somewhat alive. Now you're saying, well, tell me, what does that even mean? What it means is anything that this time of year that shuts off the Gulf means that as we go into the hottest time of year for the whole of the midsection of North America, your temperatures are used to remove water. It's evaporative processes. It gets hot, it gets dry. But if you can bring the moisture back with, Gulf flow and storms, it's replenished. If we go backward in time, you just see it faster. I do want to point out, we do have to watch this guy here. This is named Flossie, and the moisture from Flossie could get into the Baja. Having a closer look, there is the named system, and the current forecast, if we just have a quick look at it here, expects this to become a hurricane by tomorrow morning and then move up toward the Baja. But you notice there was also an event that was going on here. I just wanted to show you, though, there's a follow-up event to this as well, meaning the East Pacific's been quite busy this year. Very indicative of kind of like it's an odd relationship with La Nina. I need to dig a bit more into that statement. But anyway, you do see these two systems. And then look right there. Let's go over to the Atlantic. There we go. And you can see the potential for low pressure development around Florida. Now, what's going to happen later this week is there's going to be a cutoff low. This is on July the 3rd. If we go out there to July the 4th, you can see this weak low-level low right here that's tucked inside of, there it is, the flow. That's your Gulf flow. that's tucked inside of this ridge that's around it. So again, that's 1, 2, 3 pieces to the Bermuda high. But this little guy right here might sit and spin for a few days, delivering some major moisture. So finally we get to the precip forecast. You are going to see several disorganized looking precipitation maps unless you're around the Great Lakes into Ontario and Quebec. Outside of that, there's only 2 dominant features. Late this week, the low that's going to sit here, and the fact that we just keep streaming moisture into this area. Now, to see this together, I want to first start off with some near-term weather. We see here that the next 3 days where the Storm Prediction Center has our risk of thunderstorms. Thankfully, this does not show any elevated risk areas other than in the mid-Atlantic here when we get into tomorrow on Tuesday. So from there, let me just show you how disorganized the rainfall is going to be. It's all going to be dominated by thunderstorm outflow. As we just play through the rest of the day today, getting into tonight, look at this. Okay, yeah, there is a boundary there, but I mean, my goodness, these storms are going to take on a life of their own. That's what they do this time of year. This is now getting into midday Tuesday evening, and then playing this out there through midday Wednesday. We did get a notification from NOAA that they're going to discontinue the support of the NAM model. They're going to favor a couple of other models, which I think is a good move. So we're going to make sure that we kind of sunset this one and incorporate the new ones as we go forward. But overall, I do want to tell you that one of NOAA's flagship models, the GFS, it's having some skill score trouble right now. And you can see that its current run, and I want to thank Dr. Mallory for letting me show this, is 0.8% skill score, while the ECMWF is much higher. So I'm going to stick with the ECMWF. Now what I'm looking for here is precipitable water, juice. So there's that front I mentioned that dives down in Tuesday, but after that, it's a lot of disorganized convection on this moisture that's coming through. There goes Flossie. And by the time we get into Saturday, there is a low that's attempting to organize a bit more of this convection as it pulls it north into the central U.S. and then rolls into parts of Ontario. That's where I said the best chance at making sense of the rainfall is going to be. We then play this on out, and there's still quite a bit of juice in the atmosphere here as we get through the middle part of July. So we look at all of this and just say, well, give me an idea on total precipitation. And again, the European model is going to look very similar to what you saw in the WPC. Late in the week, here we go, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, as that low develops. See all the very wet conditions down here around the Panhandle. Our open Gulf moisture just soaking this part of New Mexico and Texas. We then play this later. There's the low rolling through. Disorganized storms will follow along its front. And we just play this out into next week. Now, because of all that moisture, the model's got to put it somewhere, and it squeezes it out. But I'm going to tell you, this will be another week of, I don't know what other phrase to use, but precipitation disparity. And what I mean by that is you're not going to have, widespread everybody getting rain unless you're riding through here or here. But most other pockets are looking drier, especially parts of the Canadian prairie. So as we start to finish this up, I want to think through week 2. Now look at the model differences. The GFS very wet. We've got the NOAA forecast very wet. But there's some interesting things happening with the European and the AI model. Look at that day 8 through 15 from the AI model. It's got some storms through the Canadian prairie, which is drier now. And then it's got this stretch in through here that's drier. And it's really starting to indicate something going on with the southwest monsoon and possibly some cutoff low action coming into California. All right, let's just deep breath before we get this finished. I got to take you back to my biggest concern. The jet stream is way displaced north. It's also way displaced south, okay? Way down here in the southern hemisphere. I want to know where this is going to go. Currently, the new CPC forecast for week 3 to 4, which is getting out there into the middle and end of July, is showing quite a bit of heat outside of here and here, which is more than likely rain-cooled area. Can you see it? What I want to know is, does this fill in drier inside of that kind of wedge I just drew there, here and here? Because we've seen hints from the European model that it's going to do that in July. So we've now been looking at this for 3 straight weeks, right? This is the new 30-day forecast for the month of July. And it's now right on starts tomorrow. And it's done this repeatedly. And I'm trying to figure out why and what it really looks like. Now, you know what I'm about to draw. If you have an active southwest monsoon and the Bermuda High lives somewhere into this region, then what this will likely do is produce a region that lives here, or there. And what you'll get off the edge of this is cascading storms through this area. They'll come in northwest flow, and it will not be as dry as advertised. What I'm worried about is this region. Not on the Front Range, but once we get off the Front Range, does this area really, truly have a dry signal? And is there something late in the month cooking down here in the Bay of Campeche, or something that could bring tropical moisture into this area? I don't know. I think it's going to be difficult to decipher. So I'll be watching these features. Like, this is the change in ocean temperature. We did not see, now through the end of June, cooling water here. If I was going to be just screaming drought for the midsection of the United States, I would have needed to see cold water developing here, and instead, over the last 7 days, it's even warmed up a bit more. Now, this is still a signal, the negative PMM, the decaying La Nina, but there's still, you saw it last week, I showed it to you. There's still stronger trade winds in this area. So that's got to be considered. But the MJO just continues to be forecast to be null space or favor, the 456 side of things, not the 812. If it was over here in the 812, we'd be talking about, again, risk of dry conditions. So I'm looking for signals, because in summer the teleconnections are weak. So I'm going to take you to Paul Roundy's site. And this is looking at, he's a professor, by the way. We're looking at a 100-day low-pass MJO and ER constructed analog. It says right there in the title. And I'm trying to figure out, there it is, where this ridge is going to be. Because through the 4th of July and beyond, there is some thought process of the jet doing something a bit more like that. And instead of getting really organized convection out of this, you tend to have disorganized, messy convection that hits the midsection of the United States. And I think that's going to be critical to watch in the month of July. I think July is going to be another month of, if you get the rain, you're going to get way, way, way too much. And if you don't get the rain, you're not going to get much at all. Well, if you don't get the rain, you don't get anything. But my point here? Keep an eye on it. I want to show you one last thing. I don't even know why I have this up, so let's skip that and go right to here. This is the last map I think I want to talk about today. It is important to note that in that global July forecast from the European model, take a look at this whole region in China. Now, we were wet in through here for the last month, and now we're seeing the model put more of the wetter conditions pretty far north, almost to Mongolia, but hitting parts of the North China Plain, Manchurian Plain, while making a lot of the Yangtze very, very dry. The European model keeps much of Europe over toward Ukraine on the drier side of average as well. And those two pieces I think are going to be quite important to look at, plus a continuation of a very active Indian monsoon. But again, this will be the question for us here in North America. Is that how we settle in on this precipitation pattern in this month? And I think we're going to have a lot to talk about day to day as we go forward. So thanks for spending a lot of your Monday with me today, and I will talk to you again very soon. Thanks.